Welcome to the quick hitter version of Dave's Front Office. Our featured discussion this week is with 76ers head coach Doc Rivers. Doc is no stranger to racism, and here's how he handled it. I know you've experienced a lot of racism in your own life. Your wife, Chris, was subjected to graffiti on her car and racist remarks when she started going out with you at Marquette. And after the two of you were married and had a family while you were playing for the Spurs, your house in San Antonio was burned to the ground by a couple of racist kids. Luckily, you and your family were not in the house. And I know Martin Luther King advocated a path of nonviolence, and I think you've followed that path by raising your voice louder, using your stature and position to advocate for change. But how did you bury your rage when you saw the ashes of your house, lost your dog, your family photographs, and trophies?
It was hard, Dave. I remember that day and pulling up to a house that was literally crashing down. And at first, I didn't know why. I just knew my house was on fire. Then the next day, they're Texas Rangers, and yeah, they're real Texas Rangers,
Right.
with the cowboy hats and all. They pull up and they're doing an investigation, and they know immediately who had done it, and it was skinheads, a group of alt-right kids who had done it once before to an Indian couple, and they burned my house down because of the color of my skin. And so the rage was there. There's no doubt. But the voice of my father, of my parents, was there as well. There will be no victims. Keep moving on. Don't let them see you hurt. Keep moving. And so that's what I did. It was funny. Now, Chris, on the other hand, I had friends too that called me. Honestly, I had honestly got friends from Chicago that called me and wanted to come up and start something.
Right.
And I said, no, I resisted all that. I said, I'm going to keep living my life to let people know there's nothing you're going to do to affect me. I'm not going to give you that pleasure of looking at me and being a vengeful person. That's not who I am. And I think that would have hurt me, and that would have hurt my life.
You know, your dad was a Chicago policeman. And while you were a young man or probably a kid, 6, 7 years old, maybe, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, I wonder, did you, especially with your dad as a cop, have a lot of discussions about race when you were a young man, about how to deal not only just with life, but with the police that may have stuck with you and that you've passed on to maybe your kids and your family?
Yeah, you have to. When you're a person of color, you better have that conversation. And I think the conversation took more notice for me is because my dad, who was a cop, was telling me about cops.
Right.
And for me, the first time I ever saw my father cry was the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. I never had heard of Martin Luther King
Right.
until the day he was assassinated. I was 7 years old, I think 6 or 7, and I come home, my grandfather and my father are on the couch crying, and I knew something was big. Now, every one of my family members were in the house, so I knew no one in my family had died. So it was very complicated for me to try to figure out, confusing, like what was going on. They were all sitting watching the riots around LA, around everywhere. The police dogs, they were showing that. And not far after is when my dad had that conversation that said, hey, listen, I'm a cop in Maywood. You are safe here. But don't you forget, when you leave this area and you get pulled over or you get stopped, if you're walking down the street, don't run, be polite. And the first question, well, what if I haven't done anything? Don't run.
That didn't matter. Your dad was telling you that didn't matter.
And he was saying, it is dangerous out there for you. And he made that clear for me, meaning now I was a black kid. It's dangerous out there. It's not what you think it is on TV. And he made a point of that.
And when you're growing up like me as a white kid, I was fortunate being in the league this long and being exposed to teammates who were black and hearing the stories. And when I got into coaching staff members, and they would tell these stories about their parents telling them about if you got stopped, how careful you had to be, what you said. I never knew about that, because if I got stopped by a cop, and the occasions I did, there was no threat to me. There was nothing that I had to worry about other than I got a speeding ticket or something.
Well, Dave, I was in a workshop during the pandemic. I think that's all we did was Zoom workshops.
Right.
And it was like 10 black guys, 10 white guys, and we discussed race. And we're all from different areas, different economic groups. And one of the most startling things, one of the guys said, a white gentleman said, I was growing up, I always ran to the cops. You guys grew up running away from the cops. He said, just the thought of that is a scary image to me. And it's very true that's what we felt. We got scared.
Yeah, and it hasn't been just recently, it's been generational.
It's been
One generation passing that on to the next.
Listen, and it's also, you think like, this is a story that I tell everybody. When I played for the Clippers, not coach, when I played for the Clippers arena was in South Central, right? And I would drive my BMW to practice. I was pulled over 4 times a week on the average, just, checking to see my license. And it got so old after a while. And I realized I was being pulled over for no other reason is I'm a black man driving a nice car in South Central LA. And, it's funny, I will say this, and this is where that gives you hope. 30 years later, 25 years later, I'm coaching. I didn't get pulled over one time in the 4 years that I coached the Clippers. So I don't know what's changed, maybe the location of the arena, I'm not sure.
Right.
But that's a difference. And so there is hope. There's marginal differences for sure.
If you'd like to hear more from Doc Rivers, check out the full version of Dave's Front Office from Pure Hoops Media.